Meet Balacio. He is a challenger Graves mid-main on EU West. From being in Plat in Season 9, he has discovered a new way to play mid. Not only is he innovating champions, he also innovates with his build, refusing to buy any kind of boots as part of the strategy. I'm going to show you how he does it. Unlike jungle Graves, who is often built as a bruiser that takes long fights and scales into the late game, Balacio builds Graves full lethality, even up to 4 items, to try and snowball on squishy champions and end the game as fast as possible. He even sacrifices buying boots for damage, not even getting the 300 gold boots most games, instead preferring to get a head start in damage, and use Yumu's Ghostblade for movement speed. His playstyle involves fast pushing of waves, pressuring tower plates, and attempting to win lane as fast as possible. In lane, Balacio pushes the lane with Q to get level 2 as fast as possible, and constantly pokes the enemy laner down using his Q and ease in to auto-attack when it's safe. He tries to kill by poking the enemy down and keeping them under tower, most often killing at level 6, as no one expects the damage, as this pick is not common. This is not a Syndra who will try and combo you with stun and ult you at level 6, which mid laners come to expect. Mids only know Graves as the farming jungler with no CC, so don't expect him to 100 to 0 them at 5 minutes into the game. Lane Graves is quite a unique playstyle, most similar to an assassin playstyle, like Zed, thriving in 1v1s, and vulnerable to CC and burst damage, as they're quite squishy. He takes Ignite Flash every game to try and win the game through his lane. This is a great solo queue strategy, and is even becoming popular with jungle Graves, taking Ignite and Smite to snowball there. As Graves, if he's ever able to get a straight up 1v1 versus the enemy mid, you'll most likely win it, especially if you poke them down in lane. However, Balacio has so much experience on Graves, he knows exactly how much damage his burst will do. This is an important thing to practice. Balacio has hundreds of mid-Graves games, and is now able to perfect the laning phase and kill pressure of the champion. If he's unable to kill the enemy mid, he'll roam down to bot lane, and use ult to finish off kills under tower. As Graves, the ult has a very long and difficult to judge hitbox, so use that to your advantage. After level 6, Balacio focuses on pressuring the enemy tower, collecting plates with his auto attacks and demolish whenever he can reach it. Often he prefers to stay in lane to grab plate gold instead of following roams. This is quite a selfish playstyle where he needs to focus on his gold income. Play for yourself by getting as much gold as possible from your lane, but make sure you're joining in on early fights, as you will likely be the strongest one there. The playstyle of jungle Graves is to full clear as often as possible, as he has great sustain, farms fast, and is efficient with gold converting to damage. Lane Graves is very similar, except he has access to even more gold, with the mid-wave and turret plates. Mid-Graves can grab items and XP much faster than jungle Graves, so he scales up very quickly. After laning phase, Balacio continues to farm around the map, making sure he stays ahead of the enemies, so that his lethality stays relevant. He can then aim to continue finding 1v1s around the map to continue his snowball. As Graves is a jungler, he also is very good at killing camps, so Balacio will often take camps around the map as he's doing this to maximise his farm and XP. Graves is a very fast tower taker, but Balacio does not split push, as he does not take TP. Mid-Graves prefers AD matchups like Kiana and Zed, as his E-dash gives armor, making the 1v1s even easier to win. He also has success versus scaling champs that cannot contest his early game, and he is able to snowball and win before they are able to be effective. For example, Kassadin, Azir, Vlad. Graves mid is great into immobile champs that cannot dodge his burst as well. For example, Twisted Fate and Orianna. The best team comps to pick lane Graves with are ones that already have CC, as Graves does not bring any, unlike many common meta mid laners. Your comp also needs a strong AP damage champion, top, jungle or AD carry, similar to comps that have Zed or Talon mid, so that you can avoid being a full AD damage team. Graves has a small range, so prefers taking fights that are scrappy and split up. He struggles with 5v5 front-to-back fights, as he is unable to position in front of the enemies, as he cannot DPS safely, and he cannot dive safely either, as he only has a short dash to escape. Try to keep fights short and use your burst damage on squishy carries to get them out of the fight as fast as possible. Once you've done this, it will become safer to join the rest of the fight, and use auto attacks to finish off remaining enemies with your teammates. If your team lands CC onto a champion, Graves has a huge burst of damage that he can finish off any champion with. This playstyle is the definition of glass cannon. He builds no resistances, so you need to make sure that In teamfights, you're doing damage where you can, positioning perfectly, and using your abilities like your ult to get out of danger and reposition so that you can keep DPSing in the fights. In late game fights, if you're able to land one auto attack on any squishy enemy champion, they won't be able to participate in the fight, and you'll then have a 4v5. The damage is so high. Since you're not buying boots with this build, you really need to make sure that you're saving your Ghost Blade for emergency situations or when you're able to join a fight with it. This way, Graves is kind of a walking turret, where he's able to join fights or leave fights, but he's not able to do both. So if you're using Ghost Blade to go in and dashing in, and then using your ult for damage, you need to make sure that you're killing the people you're focusing with that combo, otherwise you won't be able to get out and you will die. He's an assassin, but he doesn't have an escape like Zed, being able to take his shadow back to where he used it in the first place. All he has is a very short-range dash on his E, with a long cooldown, and an ult which pushes you a tiny bit. These can both be good enough to reposition in a fight and dodge skill shots, but they're not quite good enough to help you escape all the way, if you're making really bad positioning mistakes. The kind of champions you want to avoid picking this into are ones that are able to roam much better than you, and snowball the game through other lanes, such as Talon, as well as enemies that have really good wave clear, or the ability to not die to your burst. So a good example of that would be Echo, who can always push the lane back to you, so he's never pressured under tower, or has to ever trade with you. And he can also use his ult to get out of your burst damage, so you'll hardly be able to kill him. However, it's not as terrible as a matchup as it would be for other assassins, as Graves can still keep auto-attacking for large amounts of damage, whereas other champions like Zed would run out of damage after they've used their ult and will need to just back off if Echo ulted, for example. For champions that are wave clearing, such as Echo or Ziggs, for example, Balacio often has to flash under tower to finish off kills on them, which can be risky if you don't know where the enemy jungler is. This pick is best when you have good knowledge of the enemy jungler, if you can track them and their paths. Then you'll be able to extend and take trades when you know that they're not around, go for kills when they're not around, and even take the enemy raptors as much as you can. Before 6, Graves isn't very good at escaping from ganks, and he often has to try and turn them, as his E isn't very high range, but he does have a lot of armor with it, so that he can 1v2. In the situation where you are getting ganked, you want to have already poked the enemy laner down, so that they can't really contribute. That's how Balacio is always able to play so aggressively. He's always trading positively with the enemy mid, so then if the enemy jungler does show up, it's basically a 1v1, which Graves will be very good at. Balacio's most common runes are Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, and Relentless Hunter, which all help him with his early damage combos. He avoids Conqueror and Phase Rush, which are common on jungle Graves, as this build prefers the high, fast damage given by the Domination tree. For secondaries, he takes Resolve with Demolish and Bone Plating. Demolish lets him take plates pretty much every time he has solo time on the tower, and Bone Plating keeps him alive during early game in tougher matchups. He also likes attack speed in rune stats to help with CS in lane, and also easier trades. Swap for armor or magic resist depending on your enemy laner. His build is very special and specific, always starting with Corrupting Potion so that he can spam abilities in lane, take lots of trades, and keep the minion wave pushed up to the enemy tower. He rushes Ghost Blade for the early movement speed to grab kills, start roams, and escape ganks. From there he gets Dusk Blade for the lethality and on-hit damage, then Umbral Glaive for the vision control so that he can set up picks. Next, he'll buy Edge of Night for the protection Spell Shield gives, letting him get into fights. And finally, a Lord Dominix or Mortal Reminder, depending on the situation. He does not often have games that will last until 6 items, but if he does, then he finishes the build off with Sanguine Blade for the extra 1v1 damage. Another good option could be Death Stance for extra survivability. To try this in your own games, first practice CSing in lane with Graves autos in Practice Tool, as it's quite different to any other champion. Give Graves mid a bit of a try in your games. Let me know if there are any other champions like this that you think are good in mid lane that aren't normally played like this, or in any of the other lanes. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.